Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. I'm your host Diego, together with my co-host Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc, how are you doing?
Well, it looks kind of colorful. I have to say, this is the first time I'm trying this setup again after a lot of months. I haven't done the setup, but I thought because we have a special guest that I at least try to make my studio
You did
look
a touch
more
up. You did
appropriate.
a touch
So
up.
I did a little
Compliment
touch
to
up.
that.
Yes, so that's one of the things. But I'm generally excited because I'm starting to get back into a flow, which I will disrupt in a couple of weeks, and then I'll try to get back into that same flow probably in May. But aside from that, I'm excited about
Okay.
today's episode.
So before we go into the flow of the conversation, quick announcements. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com at Confoes. We're also on Instagram at Confoes. And most importantly, subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. That's confoes.substack.com. With that being said, let's get into the flow of the conversation. Who do we have with us today, Jean-Luc?
Yeah. So um, I would usually say a guest like this doesn't need an introduction, but on the other hand, they do need a proper introduction. Our guest today has been in the field of online and not only online marketing, but just the online space, I would say almost from the beginning. And the funny thing for me is that he's not even, I would think that he would be older than he is. He's actually still quite young. But even though he's from the 70s, he has been through the online space. And basically, when I talk about I want to have like 10,000 people, I want to help 10,000 people to make their first 10,000 US dollars, he's taking it a step further. He's saying like, no, I want to create a million jobs. Or actually, he is already creating a million jobs. This is somebody who started out in the search engine industry, knows all about search engines, then became the marketing manager for one of the biggest airlines in the world. He has clients that are considered the biggest, some of the biggest companies in the world as well. So basically, today I'm here to learn, not just to learn about the online space, about marketing, about creating online jobs, but I'm just here to learn about life. So without further ado, let's introduce the one and only Dennis Yu. Welcome to Social Confoes.
Hey, what's up, Diego? John Luke. You saying I'm old?
No, he
Yeah,
said
no,
not as
no, no. I'm
a
actually saying not as for somebody who has been in the space as long as you have. Like often we think of people like uh, maybe Bill Gates or Elon Musk. Elon does maybe is not even as old, but he looks old, and you feel like you're still young and you're still fresh off the bat. But you've been in the scene for how long? How long have you been in
I
the online
I turned
space?
over 30 years, and I turned 50 this year.
So
So
you've
he
been
was
there
straight
from
into it.
yeah.
Yeah, I built my
So
first website 30 something. Yeah, first bulletin board 35 plus years ago.
Oh
35.
wow. We,
So,
we
so
didn't even
tell us a
have
little
proper
bit about
internet.
that bulletin board. I'm very curious. What kind of bulletin board was it?
So back then, without me, going to jail or whatnot, there was something that was called freaking. And the
Okay.
internet back then was you would dial into basically a phone number and you'd press one for this or two for that. And you could enter these rooms where there was live chat or you could hear different kinds of recordings. And we did things like freaking where we would go to payphones. And back then, before it was digital, if you put in a nickel, it would make a certain sound, a dime, a certain sound, a quarter, a certain sound. So those were called like red boxes, blue boxes, yellow boxes. So we were, actually able to like hack AT&T and these other kinds of systems to set up all kinds of stuff because people made money on the internet back then because people would call these 1-900 or other sorts of numbers. So we set those up, and I set up bulletin boards for anything. People would chat about love and horoscopes and all kinds of, or maybe they were lonely. There'd be like a party line. This is probably well before you were born. So I learned how to build, if you think of it like websites that instead of having web pages, you would basically navigate by pressing different buttons to get to different parts of a site, if you will.
So this
So
interface was basically a phone,
before
just
93, yeah,
dialing in.
Yeah, way
this was
before then.
before 93.
Oh yeah.
So for like I always wanted to ask this question about somebody who was in the space before 93. how big was the impact of the World Wide Web?
There wasn't a World Wide Web.
Yeah.
There,
So when it was commercialized, when all of a
yeah.
sudden there was this protocol, the web protocol, where all the websites had to be similar in code, how much of a game changer was that? Or did we kind of even lose innovation from where we were previously?
In hindsight, you could look back and say it was a game changer, but back then, none of us knew that it was really going to be anything, because back in the late 70s, it was the Unix operating system. And you had these university and government computers that would talk to one another, these mainframes. And so you had to use basically these Unix terminals at major corporations or universities that had access, and you would get time, a specific window to be able to communicate. And you would use FTP, Telnet. You would be able to use like different mail programs. Like I use Pine, and there are other like tree name sorts of programs to be able to send what I guess today is email, but it was
Yeah.
just basically like text messages. And we started to learn how to, before even building websites, we were sending over just very simple, basic emails, if you will, and then we would send images as attachments. And then we could start to create these web pages basically that could load images, but it was so slow. If you wanted to send an image, even a small 28K image, it would paint it line by line by line. So you would start to see the image kind of unfold in front of you, and it would take 10 minutes to see an image. So that was the nature of what we had before. And it was seen as a technical thing that programmers like me would play with. We never thought there would be, back then, the heart of commerce, or eventually we would have it on a phone. Like, to imagine being able to do, I remember I got one of the first Nokia cell phones. Now there was no iPhone, there was no video, it was just buttons on a phone. These things were huge, right? And if you even had a cell phone, you're very important just to
Yeah, in the
even
80s.
be able
In
to
the
do
80s
that.
that was a big
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, they were so big. They were the size of a briefcase, and you'd carry them around, and only business people would have it, and would cost you like $8 per minute to make a phone call. In the 90s, I made phone calls from the airplane. If you remember, in the back seat, instead of the TV screen, there was a phone, and you could
Yeah.
pull the phone out. And if you really had to make an emergency phone call, it would charge you like $10 a minute. So just for fun, I would call friends and say, "Hey, I'm in the air from London to New York right now, and I just wanted to call and tell you I'm on the airplane." And people are like, "Oh, there's no way he's calling from the airplane," right? But now communication's free, information's free. People don't go to the library really anymore because the information is free. But back then, it was more about file transfer. And it was just a simple protocol. The idea of the World Wide Web goes all the way back to EDI and other communication protocols. So they actually took what used to be a very powerful communication protocol, and they stripped it down to be just HTTP, which is allowing anything that's not structured data at all. You could put anything you want, and that's what made it universal. The World Wide Web is that we removed what used to be amazing standards for how you passed information back, and now we've come full circle with schema.org and other things where information now is structured again. But it took removing all the constraints to allow everything to connect, and then building those protocols back up, which you never hear anybody talk about, because you have to be old like me to have that context on where things were back then.
No, I'm not saying that you're that old, but
Yeah.
for context, because you ended up in London
Yeah.
studying economics.
Yeah.
So back then, how did you decide to say like, hey, I'm gonna go to London to study?
Well, I studied everything I could in economics at Southern Methodist University undergrad, and I got a full ride to the London School of Economics, which was the place to go. They had, I want to say at that time, more Nobel laureates in economics than anywhere else in the world. And I'd been to London many times. I really wanted to spend more time there. London was kind of the gateway to the rest of Europe, and it was a great way to be able to travel. And I want to say like 65% of the students there at the LSE were actually not from London. So it was the top school of economics in the world that happened to be in London. So I tell friends of mine, I'm at the London School of Economics, and they say, "Well, where's that?" "In London." And so I learned a lot. I learned about basically what do things cost, right? Why do things cost what they cost, which is supply and demand. And I
So
learned that when there's data in a marketplace, the more data you have, the more you can win, because you have arbitrage opportunities, just like on the stock market or whoever has more information and can be smart about it will win. And that's great for me as a math, engineering, programming, technical data kind of person.
So, can you elaborate more on that intersection between programming? Because before going to London, you are
Yeah.
already doing this programming,
Yeah.
analog programming to digital programming. Can you tell us more about that intersection, how it kind of evolved and
Yeah.
impacted the way you view? We're going to talk about, what you're doing today with social media, but
Yeah.
back then, programming with economics and
Yeah.
especially arbitrage and data.
I'll give you a view that only a math or a Wall Street person who has had a lot of experience can actually tell you, which you might find interesting because it's going to give you some hindsight, some insight that you might think is obvious, but only comes through a lot of mistakes. So I was studying math 40 plus years ago. I was doing calculus when I was basically in second grade. And because my parents were Asian and, Asians are good at math, this kind of thing. And being able to do math taught me that I could process numbers and I could solve equations down. Even the most ugly of equations that are very long and complicated, you could solve down to a very simple answer. The answer is like 5, whatever it is you need. Pages and pages of calculations all the way down, and the answer is 5. And I really loved that kind of problem solving. So when it came to building web pages, it was the same kind of thing. You're basically writing equations, which is like code. So no matter what the code is, PHP or Perl or Fortran or Basic or Logo, whatever the language is, all the way down the machine code, binary code, it's really just like, it's like another language. And as long as you can speak to the computer in the language it speaks, Chinese or whatever, then you can have the computer be your worker. And that's the way I've always thought about computers for the last 40 years, is it is a worker that you can equip and you can tell it what you want it to do. I want you to, like we did the first website for Cartier, which is a jewelry company in France, and we put them on the internet. And they were saying, no, our stuff is so high end. We don't want to put it on the internet. It's not safe. It, doesn't represent our brand. And I said, no, we can actually make it beautiful. And here's a way that we can actually show the price on these different Cartier things where people can log in behind a password. This is before WordPress and PHP and all these different systems back then, to actually build a website. And then you have to put in a password and it reveals the product catalog and things like that. That was actually really, really innovative back in the 90s when we did that. And so I realized, you know what? If I could just figure out a way to talk to the computer, to get it to do what I want in whatever language, maybe it's HTML, maybe it's JavaScript, but if I can get the computer to do what I want, then I'm going to win. And if other people can figure out how to take the code that I've written, or I take the code that other people have written, which is more likely, and I can get the computer to do what I want, in school, that's called cheating, copying someone else's paper. But in programming and in the world of business, you absolutely do that. It's called mentorship. It's called collaboration. It's called whatever the word is. It's like, it's not a bad thing to be able to copy, as long as it's not like presenting this thing as yours, which is plagiarism. But sharing code was a good thing. So when it came to the world of larger websites with more transactions, and now there's lots of information on the internet. But as information was starting to grow, because there were more users, which then gave off signals because there were logs. We could parse logs. That's how I built the analytics at Yahoo 20 some years ago. They tapped me because I knew how to pull in the logs and basically create reports to figure out what are these hundreds of millions of people doing when they're searching, and how do we serve ads based on it, based on the data that we have. And arbitrage comes from being able to detect patterns and being able to serve patterns based on the patterns. So I found, like, for example, during the day, people would do fare quotes. They'd find out, like, how much is it for a trip to Cancun? Like, I'm planning my 50th birthday in October, and I'm deciding right now, like, where should we go? Well, there's this place called the most dangerous hike in the world, Mount Huashan in China. Look it up. It's scary, like these steep cliffs and people like barely hanging, wooden planks where are like rotten out and very scary. People die because they're not chained in properly. And I'm like, that's a really cool place to go. Well, let's figure out what the flights would cost. I got to go through Beijing. I might want to stop in Dubai on the way. So I'm coordinating with my friends during lunchtime, right? Because that's like, we're looking. But then I don't buy until maybe a couple weeks later because I've got to get the feedback of the other people. So I noticed, for example, that people, during lunchtime, they would like research, but then at night, when they talk to the wife, after they talk to their friends, they would buy. So if you could detect those kinds of patterns, you could figure out what kinds of ads to show when, right? And so it wasn't that I was a good programmer and I knew how to work with really large volumes of data. I did. I had the technical skills, and we built our own operating system at Yahoo because we had so much data. It was beyond what any commercial database could handle. We had to build our own. There was so much. But it wasn't because of that technical knowledge. It was because we were able to pull out the insight into human behavior. That was actually the key. That's what people don't realize. When you've processed enough data, it's the insight in the human behavior. And like I said, for the last 40 some years, learning these different languages, you don't have to do this kind of programming anymore, because when you look at ChatGPT and Gemini and whatever the other tools are that you want to use, even Sam Altman said the programming language of 2024, this year, is English, because now you can talk to the computer in English. When I had to talk to the computer,
That's how
the only
far
way to
we've
talk to the
come.
computer was via code. Now,
Yeah.
if you can think, if you understand human behavior, if you're empathetic, if you understand the nuance of why people behave the way they do, then that is the programmer of the future, and that's who's going to win.
I remember MS-DOS commands. Those were hard. Those were
Yeah,
really hard. And now
all the
actually
F
you can,
keys, the templates on top of the
yeah.
keyboard.
Now you can actually ask ChatGPT to help you out with prompts for MS-DOS. So it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. But before we go into the Yahoo part, I was wondering what would be your favorite website in the 90s? What you mentioned, like collaborating and looking at code of others. What was one of the websites in the 90s that you were like, this was really cool. This was a really fun website.
I liked Alta Vista. Alta Vista or Lycos or Dogpile or any of the meta search engines were cool because they made it easy to look across multiple areas at the same time. Because it used to be, if you had to find information, this is before there were search engines. You had to go to somebody who maintained basically a set of folders on their computer that they made public. So on their computer, like in each of our computers, even today, we have folders that we store things. And then we can say, this one folder on the computer, I will allow anybody to get access to. And so that's what the web was. And so people were known for building these different folders. Like maybe someone really liked dogs, and they kept folders with different pictures of dogs and information about dogs. And they had subfolders with different breeds of dogs. And they became kind of known as the dog person. So people would come visit that address, 192.18.172, whatever it is, they would go there, and that's where everyone knew what it was. And so we would each create, this just shows you how old I am. I can't believe I'm remembering this, but I remember I would keep a list. This is basically like bookmarks, a list of my favorite websites to go to on who collected the most interesting things. So maybe it was like Boing Boing or Wired, or a list of some of my favorite games I would play, Leisure Suit Larry or Doom or things like that. And so each of us were all basically these list collectors. And so we were list collectors on top of other people who created folders. So we're really curators on top of curators. So all search engines were just the ultimate curator of curators of curators. And that's where Yahoo started, because it was David and Jerry's ultimate guide to the World Wide Web. And what David did was he maintained this list of all these folders that had other people's folders in it. So he's maintaining this list that grew and grew to where there were thousands and thousands of people that were contributing and who were in charge of their set of folders, kind of like Wikipedia, right? You have different people that are in charge of different parts of it, like a big editorial library, full of librarians. And that's what the internet was before there was search.
How did search actually disrupt that? Because as I'm understanding it now, it's basically a public catalog and curated as we have now in social media, people curating very niche content. But this was for the total web, and you had limited types of data back then. So how did search disrupt this? Because search uses bots, spiders through go through the web, as my limited understanding, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. So search basically did the searching for you. So the spider, which is the robot that would come and search for you and crawl through everything to look for the thing that you wanted. So it was, Lycos, Alta Vista, Dogpile, all the different sorts of crawlers that were out there before there was Google. You would type in a search for, French bulldog pictures, and it would go to all the different folders and find it. But, search wasn't a new thing. Search was always around. Even before the internet, because you could, on a computer, you could do a search, right? You could search on your Windows computer. You could search with Lotus 123. You could search in DOS, right? But the fact that everything could be brought together into a centralized database to then apply search to is what made it interesting. And then what we did at Yahoo, which then Google copied, was we found that if you were searching dog was also synonymous with canine. And there's other things that were related to these dogs. Maybe you want to know not just the dog pictures, but how long they lived and where the breeders were and how do you care for the dog and other kinds of related sorts of things. So we could see what people were searching on. And if they did the same search that you did, but they also looked at these other things, then we'd also show those other things to you. And that's where search really became powerful, where at Yahoo and Google, we took the additional step to say, let's not just retrieve the one piece of information you're looking for. Let's find all the other things that would be helpful based on what other people just like you were looking at.
Now, I want to know your personal opinion on the Yahoo versus the Google fight. Because, like you mentioned,
Mm,
Alta Vista and Lycos were kind of like, I wouldn't say the OGs, but those were the ones that we first got to know. And then Yahoo came over, and I think at first Google was much more a search engine, and Yahoo was an actual company. Like Yahoo had different parts.
mhm.
Yahoo really had the email. I remember like when I came back, and I'm talking 10 years, 15 years later, when
Yeah.
I came back to Suriname, all the government officials had Yahoo email addresses.
Yeah.
Like this was before now everything's
Mhm.
centralized through the
Yeah.
government. But before that, everything was Yahoo. For
Mhm.
me personally, it feels like Yahoo's kind of lost its power due to, I think, two bad purchases. One being GeoCities,
Yeah.
which was
Which they
supposed to
shut
be
down
a big
eventually. Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the second one was broadcast.com. I'm not
Yeah.
as upset with broadcast.com because it ended up with the Dallas Mavericks money.
Yeah.
So I at least got to
Yeah.
enjoy it. But to take us a little bit through the millennium phase, the switch, and why was Google able to kind of take an advantage that Yahoo wasn't able to take when it came to the search space?
So that's a story other people tell. And it seems to make
Yeah.
sense and it seems convenient, but that's not actually what happened. Let me
Okay.
tell you something that almost nobody knows except people on the inside. And it may
Yeah.
shock you because this is not just like an old person telling you what happened 20 something years ago, but it's actually very relevant for today when you see when you see the pattern, you see these kinds of trends. So I remember there was a time, 2001 maybe, and we had a lot of engineers that went to go work at Google. A lot of the people on my team that I trained up, they went to go work at Google, and vice versa. People from Google came and worked on our team, and we had Frisbee. We played Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, and sometimes people from Google would come over, and we would play Frisbee, ultimate Frisbee against each other. Like our campuses were 5 miles apart. I would ride my bike over there and eat their food because their food was free, and our cafeteria wasn't free; it was subsidized. So I had to pay like $3 for a meal, which is still super cheap. But we were all friends with each other. So it wasn't like we were necessarily competitors, and it wasn't like it was some secret. Like we all were friends with one another, right? That's how it is. Like Adidas and Nike are both in Portland. They're literally like a couple miles apart, right? I like to visit both of them whenever I go to Portland. So one of the engineers on our team put together a tool, and it would do a search. And on the left side, it would be either Yahoo results or Google. And the other one, like you didn't know which one, but it would search Yahoo and Google and would show the results side by side. And randomly, you wouldn't know which one was which. It would just show the 10 results, right? And then people could come and vote and, do the search and vote on who had the better results, A or B, like a blind taste test kind of, right? Guess who won?
Probably Yahoo.
Neither, because they're almost identical.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Now, back when Yahoo was a community and a portal, like you mentioned using Yahoo Mail, I still have my Yahoo Mail. We were number one in mail, sports, shopping, finance. We built our own dating site. We built all of these things as a portal. But search was the main pillar. And so when it came to search, we actually were even. It was almost identical. You couldn't tell which one was better or not. And that's because Yahoo appeared. This is all about PR. This is, and the fact that you say this is a product of the PR. Let me explain. So people had the idea that Yahoo was cluttered because there wasn't just the Yahoo search box. They were like all the other things that we had as a portal. Google came in and they said, you know what? We're very clean. We're very simple. We do search really, really well. The same search we had, the same engineers that went back and forth. Of course, you poach each other's engineers. There's no non-compete. You can't enforce that in Silicon Valley. It was the same. It was provably, it was the same. And so my friend Mitch, he was also one of the engineers at Yahoo, and his wife Lisa ran PR Google. And we'd have lunch every day, and I'd say, "So what are you guys doing?" And so he would tell me. And eventually, they sold their stock and bought $100 million of property in Hawaii and this kind of thing. But what they did from a PR standpoint was Google was so good at convincing the media that they were so darling and their search results were so clean and it was just the one box and all that. They controlled the media kind of like Apple does when they come out with the new iPhones and whatnot. So they didn't actually win in technology. And the thing that makes them money? That makes them all their money, like 95% of their money. How does Google make their money?
Ads.
Ads.
Ads. So those PPC ads that are based on keywords. Remember now, the first 5-6 years of Google being alive, maybe longer, all the questions were how, like, the search engine is really cool, but how are they going to make any money? Because they didn't have any kind of ads. And do you know the idea of showing the ads in the search results next to the keyword? You know where Google got that from?
I would guess from Yahoo.
They got it from Yahoo. And so everybody on the inside knew that. So we had a lawsuit that was ready to go, and they knew from the very beginning, so that when Google eventually went public, because that's when they'd raised the money, there's no sense in suing them when they didn't have any money. And they knew the minute they went public, we made billions of dollars because we got several $billions in cash and an equity in Google because they took that from us at Yahoo. That's an open secret. They didn't invent PPC. They popularized it. They didn't invent search. I was working side by side with a lot of these engineers that built some of the core infrastructure of the internet. Like several cubes away from me was Rasmus Lerdorf, and he's the guy who invented PHP. These are all the people who invented the core contributors to the open source software that we know and use today. Were people that I got to see and have lunch with and play frisbee with and pee next to, like people I would see every day. And that's what's actually going on. It wasn't that there was a technological advantage. Now, because Google had a marketing PR advantage, they're able to leverage that in the media, and that's how they won. And then when they started to make more money, that snowball effect allowed them to hire more engineers. And then, of course, Yahoo became irrelevant because, as you mentioned, the acquisition thing. They hired Terry Semel, who was the chairman of Warner Brothers, which is the movie, Hollywood company. And this guy thought it was all about doing deals and buying other companies instead of what we actually were built and founded upon, which is building. And so the engineers at that point in 2003, 2004-ish became second class. And that's when I left, right? When
So
it wasn't about engineering. It wasn't about building things. It was marketing. It was all this other stuff.
But I feel like Google got a piece of their own because once Sheryl Sandberg left to Facebook, all of a sudden the shift came to Facebook with the advertising as
Yeah.
well.
And
So
then all
in
the
the
people
end
that
of the
left
day,
Facebook to
yeah,
do other things, right? This is what happens with every one of them.
yeah,
Everyone comes to the latest one saying, "Oh, we're very loyal and we want to make the world a better place," but it's really for the money. And then they start their own thing, and so it just keeps happening. And the same thing even happened to us at Yahoo, right? Some of these other things that were like, do you know where the Yahoo logo came from? The IP, the Yahoo Cake Company. this cake company in Dallas, the exact same thing. Yahoo, it looked exactly the same. Just everyone is ripping everyone off.
So at what point did you decide like, hey, is this in this day and age I can start my own company, decide for myself? And how did you end up making the decision like, hey, I'm gonna start my own
It
company?
was never a single decision. So I was one of those engineers that I could speak on stage. So, we'd have to send somebody to go speak at the conference. So I would go speak as Yahoo. I was a decent speaker. I learned how to speak. I did Toastmasters, and the other engineers didn't want to speak. So I would speak, and that led to consulting. And I already had a really good network while I was at Yahoo because, why wouldn't you? And so I was helping a lot of friends that are on the side, but it's very hard working in Silicon Valley, but also trying to help all these friends because, everyone hits you up. Even like your family members and friends hit you up and, oh, my router doesn't work. Can you help me? That's not what I do. It's something else. Why don't you unplug it and hit reset? But people like everyone would come to me. But I already had such a connection and I was already involved with a lot of nonprofits that it was very easy to transition into an agency like thing where I was then being able to directly, I had to quit Yahoo to then be able to actually officially serve these other people as clients. But I was doing consulting all along. And the whole thing that I built at Yahoo, I built an internal analytics team. So I already had an agency because if you think about all the properties within Yahoo, mail, shopping, sports, finance, travel, small biz, horoscopes, all of them, they needed marketing support. They needed data. They needed ads. They needed all these, email campaigns built. They needed landing pages built. So I already ran an agency inside of Yahoo for many years. So it was no different than to leave, except I did now do it with my own money. I didn't have the benefit of the Yahoo homepage. I didn't have the benefit of like Yahoo is with the infrastructure, but I had the experience of being able to run an agency, being able to run ads. At one point, I was the largest PPC spender on the planet. I spent more money than anyone else in the world in PPC, but it's because I had Yahoo's pocketbook. I could spend, as it wasn't my money, of course, but then it switched into doing it for other companies. And then it wasn't my money either, but it was still like there was more accountability because I couldn't just hide behind the power of Yahoo. If I made mistakes at Yahoo, which I made a lot, it wasn't the worst they could do is fire me, right? But the mistakes were more personal if I was doing it under my agency, instead of like under the Yahoo umbrella, if that makes sense.
So what advice would you give like young entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, but I want to start my own thing, but they have limited experience?
Well, let me ask you this. So do you think if I didn't have the experience at American Airlines and Yahoo, that I would be able to successfully start an agency that could serve like Nike or Red Bull or guys like that?
I think you would be. I think it would be harder because there would be mistakes that you didn't make now that you would be making with them as clients and maybe with the earlier clients. So it might be harder to get to the same level, but I still think you would be able to pull it off based on the
Maybe.
background that you
I mean,
have.
maybe if I just hustled
Yeah.
and I've worked hard enough and I watched enough YouTube videos and, whatever, I could get
I
lucky.
But the network probably is one of
yeah.
the
The
harder
network is
parts.
huge and the network is probably the biggest thing, but the network only happened because I developed competency. See, a lot of people, they only look at it one layer deep. Oh, well, Dennis knows everybody, and that's why he's able to do this, this, and that. Yes, but the reason you have that network is because you have competency to begin with. So just because I know, I'm not going to name drop, but just because I know a bunch of these various people, that doesn't do anything, right? The reason why I'm able to hang out with them is because I can create value to them. The reason why they seek me out and want to spend time with me is because I have some experience and I know how to solve problems, right? So the combination of having experience and having worked on some big projects, having run a lot of ads, having done a lot of, video, a lot of whatever it is, built a lot of websites is what gave me that network. If I didn't have any experience, but I had a great network, then I'd basically just be a salesperson. But as a salesperson, all I could do is just leverage my network to make connections, which is valuable because, hey, Jean-Luc, let me connect you to Diego or let me connect you to, Mark or that. Like I can make connections. But if you have the ability to make connections and you have enough strategic knowledge, now you're dangerous. So I don't think I could have done it. Maybe with a great network, I could land Adidas as a client. But then they say, all right, we've got a new shoe for the Olympics. It's lightweight, weighs less so you can jump higher. Now let's run some campaigns. I wouldn't know what to do, right? I could kind of guess, but I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, that first-hand experience makes a night and day difference.
So if you
I
have a
do wanna
mentor who's done it and I partner with them, and if I were to start again today, I would find a mentor who has done it and learn from them. I'd go work for free. I'd do whatever is necessary to get the experience and the network at the same time.
There's two things I want to quickly touch upon before moving on. First thing was you mentioned you had a speaking competency while you were at Yahoo, you are a Toastmaster. Like, how much was the ability to speak in public at such events? How much did that weigh in you building that network and being recognized as an authority in the space?
What do you think?
I think it had a tremendous impact.
It did. And then with public speaking experience, you could speak in small groups. Like at Yahoo, we did brown bag lunches. So like, Tuesdays or whatever, one engineer each week would share something and everyone would get their lunch and would teach. And that's an example of public speaking, but it's a small group. And then maybe you speak at a conference, maybe you do a webinar, other ways where you're just openly teaching what you know. But just because you know how to speak doesn't mean anything, because it goes back to the same issue of you have to have something worth talking about. You have to have your own experiences and stories to talk about. But if you have some experience, now you have something you can talk about. A lot of people want to be professional speakers. They see that, I was in Dubai a week ago and I was the main speaker at Affiliate World. Yes, but I was sharing real stories. It wasn't because I was Affiliate World that caused me to build my network and all that. It's because I had something worthwhile to share, like how dollar a day works, how to use AI tools to be able to write a book. I invited Dan Henry to be on stage with me, right? It wasn't because I know Dan Henry, right? It's not. A lot of people think it's superficial. Think it's because of the speaking, because of the network. No, it's because of the expertise and experience I have with those people. They only see Usain Bolt win the 100 meters. They don't see all the work people had to put in. How many years did he have to spend sprinting to be able to run the 100 meters in 9.5 seconds, right? It's not the speaking, right? The speaking helps, but it's only because I was in the right place and I did a lot of the work in silence, in the dark. People don't seem to want to appreciate that. They only look at the very end when there was the victory.
Yeah, it's basically those 10,000 hours go unseen.
Yeah.
And on the second part, you mentioned mentorship, and I think you believe mentorship is very critical. Can you elaborate more on mentorship and how someone can approach that? You already mentioned go work for free
Yeah.
to get that skill, get that network.
Yeah.
Like, how should someone think about it, and how do you approach a mentor? Is it something that's official? It's something that's unofficial? Do you need to know the mentor in person? Like,
A
what are
mentor is someone who
strategies?
cares about you personally. So a mentor is not the same thing as a coach. It's the same as like hiring someone for consulting. A mentor is someone who takes a personal interest in your success. So because it's a personal relationship, it's just like dating. Like how do you approach finding a wife? Well, it's the same thing, right? Can I force John Luke to be my best friend? No, I can't. Maybe he likes me, maybe I like him, but I can't force him, right? So you can't force anyone to. It's not like if you do these 5 things, then so and so will agree to be your mentor. Like it's not. We're not prostitutes, right? So what happens is step 1: find somebody who has done something that you would like to also achieve. Or another way of saying that is if you figure out what exactly, very clearly, what you want to achieve, who has achieved that? If you just say like, oh, I want to make $1 million, too broad. Someone who's very they built a digital marketing agency in the local space, or they've done e-commerce in a particular, like someone who's achieved, right? You need to be very, very specific about what success looks like for you. Find someone who's done exactly that. Then say to that person, I would like to be like you. But instead of just blurting out, hey, why don't you go ahead and put aside all the things that you're doing and go ahead and serve me? Like that makes no sense at all. You need to follow them. If they've written a book or whatever, buy the book and read it, listen to their podcasts, creep on them on social media, learn everything about them. And then once you put in enough time to show that you're serious about this, then you start commenting on them. Comment on their Facebook, on their LinkedIn. Maybe they go to an event and they're speaking, buy a ticket, go there, right? Don't be a creep, right? But just show that you really want to be like this person. And then as you start to have a conversation, initially through lightweight social, like on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, they start to notice your comments, right? They do. Even the big people, they notice. Like even Gary Vaynerchuk will notice when I comment on his stuff, right? Then they'll see like, oh yeah, I've seen this guy before. He's not just some random fan person. And then you say, hey, I'm writing a blog post about the 10 things on what's going to happen in 2024. And I'd love to get your contribution as one quote. I just need one sentence if you could, right? And they say, why, sure, here's my one sentence, right? And then you take the next step. You say, hey, I'm doing a podcast and I would love to have you for 15 minutes. And here's the questions I want to ask you. And when we do the podcast, I guarantee that you will have 100,000 views on this. Even if you're nobody. Why? Because you're going to run my dollar a day technique against his audience and people where he would like to be seen, so that you're doing the work, right? And then he'll say yes to that. And I say yes to that all the time. People say, hey, Dennis, I'd love you to be on my podcast. I'm a nobody, but I guarantee that I'm going to process the videos according to how you teach, the Content Factory, and run dollar a day against it. Like, okay, I'll be on your podcast, right? And then you say, I admire what you're doing so much. I would love if we could have some lightweight kind of mentorship, right? Where I know, of course, the value is I want to learn from you, and I want to achieve the same goal that you had, but I want to add value to you first before I just ask. Because most people make the mistake, even if they can even get to the point that I talked about here, which 99% of people can't. But even if they get to that point, they screw themselves because they say, well, can you give me your WhatsApp? And then anytime I have a question, I just want to be able to call you. And like, people who are successful are not just hanging around doing nothing, right? They have families, they have priorities for their life. There's things they want to achieve. They have big goals, right? So why would they want to put aside everything and prioritize you, right? Ahead of their friends, ahead of their children, why would they do that? So if you start by adding value first, then they'll find a reason to do that. And then they'll, adopt you in a way. And so the CEO of American Airlines adopted me, and he was my mentor. And he did so much for me. I met living presidents of the United States. I had dinner with people that are amazing, that I had no business being in the same room with, right? But that's because I wanted to add value first. What can I do? Can I go make some copies? Can I go do this one thing? Can I do some research? Can I, help your son with something? What can I do to be useful, right? I want to be useful first. So I always want to give more than I get, right? And so people disqualify themselves from finding a mentor because it's all about ask. Doesn't work like that.
There's so many follow-up questions I want to ask, but due to time constraints, I'm actually going to ask you to pick a topic. Topic one would be advertising, and topic two would be scaling your business. Which one would you prefer?
You choose.
Okay, I really want, because we have a lot of discussions on AI,
Yeah.
and I think you're somebody, at least from what I've seen and what I've heard so far, are somebody who kind of has been scaling himself with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So the traditional approach, of course, like you mentioned, like when people get busy because they have a lot of requests,
Mm-hmm.
they start strategizing like, okay, how do I scale this? Do I scale this through an agency that I have like people working for me who I can, if the project is small enough or they can handle it, I'll divert it to them. Another way would be to have like a membership program saying like, hey, for everybody that's on the same page who has a little budget, we do this together with a big group, and then I
Right.
scale up towards bigger, smaller exclusive programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, now there's AI,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of things, especially, and for people that are watching or listening in, um, I thought I worked a lot behind my computer, but I think Dennis beats me. Like even if in the tropical rainforest in Suriname, he was like trying to find, and you actually found Wi-Fi almost everywhere, which was amazing.
Yes.
Like places where we wouldn't be able to find internet, Dennis found internet. But um, you've been able to kind of replicate yourself with AI, or at
Mhm.
least make AI work for you. And now that you've explained how you want the computer to utilize the computer best,
Mhm.
what would be like a good step for people to understand how to scale their business and how to slowly incorporate AI into it?
It's actually really easy. Just 2 hours ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who does remodeling in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he does it for all the major sports teams and the coaches and football players. And he also has a very extravagant lifestyle, if you can imagine. And he's been expanding. And so we got on a coaching call and met with him and his wife, and we're going to expand his business further using the fact that he has such great social media presence that all the young adults want to see his sports cars, and the fact that he's with the players. And there's one player has one room with like 300 shoes in it. You know how it is, right? And so he wanted to scale that. And there's all these different things that occur in his business. So he remodels kitchens and showers, and he buys houses and flips them, does all these things, which is what happens when you become an entrepreneur. You start to own lots of things and you start to have lots of people and start to see like the bottleneck is in training and operations, not in marketing, because it ultimately boils down to people at some component. And then having more competent people becomes the bottleneck. So I told him, of all the things, and I think he gave me permission to share this as well. So I'm going to post this in my Facebook group of 40,000 people. I said, your issue is not SEO, even though I know that's what you initially came to me for. Your issue is that you're not focusing on the one thing that is driving you the most results. And for him, it happened to be social media, because he could go to the restaurant. And so I said, if the thing that's driving you, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Yeah,
So it's not
familiar with it.
80-20 anymore. It's 95-5. So that 5% of what you do is driving 95% of the results. That's an amplifier. Don't try to do more. Take the thing that's working the best and just do way more of that one thing. So for him, the social media was working really, really well. So I said, let's run dollar a day against it. And because you're relying purely upon organic social. Let's run dollar a day against some of the best. When you're hanging out with the coach of the NFL team and you're looking at his house and his new kitchen that you built and all this, well, you've posted stories like this from years ago. Why don't we put $1 a day against it and let it run over and over and over again? Then you don't have to keep posting new every single day. Because when you make a post on social media, how long does it last?
A few seconds, depending
And
on
then
the
you have to post
platform.
again. You're like a drug addict. You have to get high every time, right? But why not let dollar a day continue to grow? And so when I think about scaling, I'm not thinking about like, how do I just massively do more work or find, internet in the corner of the island, like John Luke and I were talking about. That's true. I was walking around everywhere with my laptop trying to find where the best signal was, crazy, the things you have to do. But where do you amplify? So I think of it this way. If, let's say, someone's a good singer, right? They have a really good voice and you want to reach more people. Well, you move from a 100 watt amplifier speaker system to a 1000 watt amplifier system, right? But the key is that person knows how to sing. But if someone sucks at singing, let's say it's me, I don't know how to sing, and you move me from a 100 watt amplifier to a 1000 watt amplifier, what's going to happen? People are going to call the police on me, right? They're going to say there's this horrible man trying to, he's screaming or something, right? So it always starts with the ingredient of what's working the best. And that's why, like when we did ads for the Golden State Warriors, we focused on those highlight moments where Steph Curry was making this crazy half-court shot, or all these highlight moments, and we put ad dollars against it. Even if we weren't selling anything, we were just amplifying the highlight moments, and that would sell more jerseys, and more people would buy tickets and all this. Even if we weren't, it wasn't content about, hey, you need to buy tickets. It was just highlight moments we were putting out there in the algorithm on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter, wherever. TikTok would find more people that were interested in that highlight moment. So my advice to anybody who wants to scale their business is, of all the things you do, like all of us, we're busy entrepreneurs doing 50 things. What are the one or two things that are the highlight moments because of who you're with, because of the result that you can repeatedly drive? What's the one thing you can do that people really value, they pay money for? Talk about that, just that. And put that out there on Facebook, put it on the website, put it on wherever, and use our dollar a day tactic against it. It's an amplifier. If it's working, if your song is good, if your product is good. This guy, his 1 day bathroom remodels, like a new shower, everything, all in 1 day. He's done it many times, right? People can call up anyone who's done it. They can look at celebrities that have had it done, right? He can repeat that over and over and over again because his business is solid. Because his business is solid, then we can turn the knob from 100 watts to 1,000 watts and get more of the same. And I've done that for the last 30 years. I did the same thing at Yahoo. I found things that were working really, really well. And then I turned the knob on it. But the key is you have to discover, focus, prioritize what that particular thing is. And that's what you learn to go full circle from all the math and whatever and programming that I have done. It comes down to that one principle. What's the thing to amplify?
Yeah, I'm going silent here with Diego. Go ahead.
I think that definitely goes full circle, and I think that's definitely an answer to most people. Like, whenever am I ever going to use math and calculus in the real world? It's basically problem solving. So, on that note, as we close off with a few last minutes, you have a mission to create 1 million jobs, as Jean-Luc mentioned in the
Yeah.
intro. And with the rise of AI, and as you mentioned, apply the 95-5 rule, the
Mhm.
improved Pareto principle. How do you see these 1 million jobs in the future coexisting with AI?
Here's what's going on. You have tools that get better and better. As the tools get better, they replace people that were doing things that the tool can do better. So we've got a lot of Uber drivers out there. But in 5 years, I don't think there's going to be many Uber drivers because the AI is going to do the driving, right? As the AI gets more and more sophisticated, it is unfortunately going to eliminate a lot of jobs. And so the sophistication is called the API line. As the API line rises, it does two things. It kills off jobs of anyone who's below the API line, and it creates jobs above the API line. So you could do a lot of research into this thing called the API line and what moves the API line. Now, we've already created 250,000 jobs because of our partnerships in the Philippines with onlinejobs.ph, with Fiverr, with some of our friends in Pakistan. So I think 1 million jobs is reasonable, given that we know what is working, which is teaching young adults and not so young adults how to use different tools to build websites, tools to edit videos, tools to create content, tools to run ads. And all these AI tools, they're just another set of tools. So if you can't adapt and learn how to use the tools, then you're going to live below the API line and you're not going to be relevant because the tool is going to, take the order at McDonald's, drive the car, all these things that the AI is doing now. Google has a bot now that can actually cook in the kitchen. Its fingers are so dexterous. It can actually crack eggs and unscrew lids. Like, it's crazy. Like the robot fingers are so delicate. I think they'll have one soon to play the guitar, like all of these things, right? So what we're doing is we're teaching these young adults how to use the tools so the AI works for us. But in order to stay above the API line, what are the things that we can do to stay above the API line? Well, the number one thing is empathy through understanding human behavior, through active listening. So we're teaching these young adults how to communicate because, as I said before, the programming language of 2024 and beyond, of today, is English. It's language, it's speaking, it's not code anymore because the AI can translate that into the necessary code to then get the website built or whatever it is that you need to have done. So if you can speak it clearly, And it's not about prompt and, oh, here's a magic book of 100 prompts, like some Harry Potter book of spells. No, it's empathetically being able to communicate, your communication skills, just like public speaking, your ability to provide context, not recite like a robot a certain set of words. That doesn't help because if the robot already knows what those words are, but it's your ability to provide context via stories and whatnot. And I think the more storytellers we can create, the more people who can empathetically sit down with the business owner and understand their strategy and understand their why story, understand how they started their business, understand other things, then those young adults can use the different AI tools as the AI tools get better and better to be able to do everything possible to get more people to that particular business that provides that particular service, because that business actually does a better job with the garage doors, actually does a better job fixing the pipes or mowing the lawn or whatever, doing the teeth, whatever it is that business does. That's why I think there's such a huge opportunity in local, because that's where the million jobs are going to come from. Your favorite restaurant, your favorite chiropractor, your favorite veterinarian who takes care of your poodle, whatever it might be. It's the service providers that are going to win because they're the ones that need help from people who are equipped to use the AI tools. I don't believe it's going to go straight to Skynet and the robots now take over the world. No, that's Hollywood. It's going to be people that are using the robots. And so we want to equip the people.
This has been such a fun episode. Unfortunately, we're reaching the end of the hour mark. Dennis, before we let you go, we would love to ask you if people are interested, if they've listened to this podcast and like, wow, I want to get to know more. What's the best way to reach out to you?
You can reach out to me by Googling me. And so we have this thing, areyougoogleable.com. We want everyone to be Googleable. So type in Dennis space YU into Google and you'll see a knowledge panel, all these things that pop up. And whatever your favorite channel is, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, whatever it is, I'm on all of them, right? And I'd encourage Jean-Luc and Diego, you guys should be Googleable as well, right?
I've
When we
already
type
worked
in
on
your
that.
name, for any of us, I should be able to type in your name and the number one result better not be LinkedIn or somebody else worse, right? It better be you. It better be your website, right? I want to see jeanluccharant.com. Your personal brand website is number one. Because remember, the winners in AI are those who are actually, ironically, the most personable. I
I
want us
feel
all to be able to
offended.
connect as people.
I feel offended that LinkedIn is on top.
That means you're not doing a good job in your personal brand.
Oh my God. My own website is below the fold. It's like
But we'll fix it.
6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a whole checklist. And if you want to know, just like I said, are you Googleable? Go Google Knowledge Panel, Dennis Yu, and you'll see the exact checklist on how to do it. I practice what
I'm
I
doing
preach.
it right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
People ask
I'm still,
questions. They ask me questions. I go to Google, type in their question, and paste the first result back to them. That's what happens when people ask me questions. You would not believe it.
awesome. With that being said, type in Google Dennis Yu, Jean-Luc, and my name, and you'll see if we're Googleable or not, and reach out there. Thank you so much, Dennis. This has been an amazing hour and very insightful hour. And we really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed your time here in Suriname as well
Yeah.
last year. And who knows, maybe encounter each other again soon. Jean-Luc,
Next
do you have
year.
any
Yeah, I made a lot
closing
of
thoughts?
connections, That's the beauty of meeting people is that you build connections. And now we have
Awesome.
friends. So I would love to connect. Love to keep it going.
This has been an amazing episode of Social Confoes. Don't forget to rewatch this episode on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Confoes, or any other streaming platform that you prefer. Dennis, we want to thank you so much for being part of Social Confoes. This was Social Confoes. We see you back next
Thank you,
week,
gentlemen.
same place, same time. Bye bye.